Most people believe auto-renewal exists because we forget. Because we fail to remember a date, or overlook an email, or allow a charge to pass without noticing it in time. And this belief is comforting because it frames the loss as an error rather than as a condition. It suggests that the system itself is neutral, that nothing is being taken, only neglected, and that the solution is simply better attention, better reminders, better discipline. As if the structure itself were innocent and the outcome accidental. But systems that extract value with near-perfect regularity across millions of people for years at a time are not built on chance, and they are not sustained by forgetfulness alone. They are built on something far more reliable than memory. They are built on how human beings experience time. 2,000 years ago, Seneca observed that people guard their property carefully, argue over boundaries, dispute sums, and defend even small amounts of money with intensity, while allowing their time, which is the only resource that cannot be replenished, to be claimed freely, casually, and without resistance. He did not describe this as stupidity or weakness or moral failure, but as a misunderstanding so deeply embedded in daily life that it goes unnoticed even by those who suffer from it most. Time does not feel like a possession. Money announces itself when it leaves. A balance changes. A receipt appears. A number is reduced. Time does none of this. It passes without sound, without mark, without friction. And because of that, it is treated as if it were abundant, even when it is not. Auto-renewal operates entirely within this silence. When a subscription renews, nothing happens in the way the mind recognizes as an event. There is no interruption, no demand for judgment, no forced moment of reconsideration. Only continuation, which feels natural, even appropriate, because it does not disturb anything. And it is within continuation that consent begins to decay. At the moment of subscribing, there is clarity. A price is visible. A benefit is imagined. A future self is projected, using the service, extracting value, justifying the cost. This moment feels active. The mind is present. The choice feels intentional. But that presence is temporary. Auto-renewal does not depend on that moment continuing. It depends on that moment never returning. Once the initial decision has been made, the system no longer asks for agreement, because agreement is no longer necessary. Silence is sufficient. Seneca warned that the most dangerous losses are those that do not announce themselves as losses at all, because what is taken slowly is absorbed into habit, and what becomes habitual stops being questioned. Violent theft provokes resistance. Gradual loss produces accommodation. Auto-renewal is gradual loss rendered comfortable. Each cycle passes without requiring evaluation, without requiring the user to decide whether the service still serves them, whether the cost still reflects the value received, or whether the conditions under which the original choice was made still exist. The system assumes continuation, and in doing so, it transfers the burden of action entirely onto the user, who must now remember, decide, and intervene in order for anything to change. This is not deception in the crude sense. Nothing is hidden, nothing is falsified. It is asymmetry. To continue requires no effort. To stop requires effort, attention, and a willingness to interrupt what has become normal. Designers understand this, not because they are uniquely cynical, but because the structure aligns with something Stoic philosophy recognized long before digital systems existed. The mind conserves effort by default. Effort is reserved for urgency. What does not demand attention is treated as settled. Auto-renewal ensures that continuation never feels urgent. Over time, subscriptions fade from awareness entirely. They become part of the background architecture of life, like utilities, like rent, like recurring obligations that are no longer evaluated, but simply endured or accepted. At this point, the service is no longer chosen, it is assumed. Seneca drew a careful distinction between benefits that strengthen independence and benefits that create obligation, noting that what appears generous on the surface can, over time, become a form of dependence if it cannot be refused without cost. Auto-renewal moves services quietly across this boundary, not because the service necessarily worsens, but because disengagement accumulates friction. Passwords are forgotten, data is stored, habits are formed, routines adjust. The cost of leaving increases, even if the value of staying does not. Eventually, the mind begins to treat the expense as fixed, as something that cannot be changed without disruption, and anything that requires disruption begins to feel unnecessary, even when it is rational. At this stage, value is no longer measured, only continuity remains. The visible cost of a subscription is monthly, but the deeper cost is temporal, because each renewal eliminates a future moment of judgment, a moment when attention might have returned and the decision might have been reconsidered. Seneca argued that life is long enough if it is used deliberately, and that waste most often occurs not through excess, but through neglect, through allowing days to be consumed by arrangements that were never examined and never renewed by choice. Auto-renewal does not waste time dramatically, it wastes it quietly, by allowing past decisions to govern present conditions without review. A choice made once is granted indefinite authority, even though the person who made that choice may no longer exist in the same form. Circumstances change, needs change, values shift, priorities reorder themselves, but the charge continues. Stoic ethics did not treat virtue as a static achievement, but as a continuous practice, requiring attention, reassessment, and presence. Because, in their view, a life governed by unexamined habits was partially surrendered. Auto-renewal removes the need for practice. It freezes judgment at a single point in time and applies it indefinitely, converting what was once a decision into an assumption. This efficiency benefits the system that receives without asking, because systems that do not require renewal of consent scale more easily than those that do. One subscription feels trivial, several feel normal, many become invisible. The model grows not by persuasion, but by accumulation, by allowing small, individually insignificant commitments to aggregate into a structure that is rarely examined as a whole. Seneca warned that luxury multiplies needs, not because comfort is inherently corrupting, but because dependence spreads unnoticed when conveniences are layered without reflection. Auto-renewal is the modern mechanism by which this layering occurs, quietly, incrementally, without requiring explicit desire for more, only tolerance of continuation. Small charges, frequent intervals, no interruptions. What renews without attention slowly replaces choice, and what replaces choice reshapes how time, energy, and resources are distributed across a life. This is why auto-renewal is not a mistake. It is not an oversight. It is not a convenience that went too far. It is a design aligned with how people misperceive time, how they avoid friction, and how easily silence can be mistaken for consent. What is renewed without attention is rarely chosen, and what is rarely chosen gradually governs more than it deserves.